I'm Mary, 24F, and I want to share my story with you all. I come from a wealthy family, and I've always had the best of everything. When I joined a new university for my higher studies, I was excited about the opportunities that lay ahead. I had always been a bright student, and I was determined to excel in my new environment. During my first week at the university, I met Luke, 25M. He wasn't from a rich background like me, but he was incredibly intelligent and dedicated to his studies. We didn't interact much at first, just exchanging polite hellos in the hallways. Everything changed when our professor assigned us to work together on a college project. At first, I was a bit apprehensive about working with someone I barely knew, but as we started spending time together, I realized how wrong I had been. Luke was not only smart but also kind and funny. We spent hours in the library, poring over books and debating ideas for our project. I found myself looking forward to our study sessions, not just for the work but for the company. As the weeks went by, our relationship evolved. We started grabbing coffee after our study sessions, and soon we were having lunch together almost every day. I found myself opening up to Luke about things I had never shared with anyone else. He listened without judgment and always had a way of making me feel better. One day, as we were walking back to our dorms after a late-night study session, Luke stopped suddenly. He turned to me, his eyes shining in the moonlight, and said, "Mary, I think I'm falling in love with you." My heart skipped a beat. I had been feeling the same way but was too scared to admit it. Without thinking, I leaned in and kissed him. It felt like everything in my life had been leading up to this moment. From that day on, Luke and I were inseparable. We studied together, ate together, and spent every free moment in each other's company. For the first time in my life, I felt truly happy and content. However, our happiness was short-lived. When I told my parents about Luke, they were less than thrilled. They couldn't understand why I would want to be with someone who didn't come from money. My father, in particular, was furious. He threatened to cut me off financially if I continued seeing Luke. I was devastated. I loved Luke, but I also didn't want to disappoint my family. For days, I was torn between my heart and my family's expectations. Luke was patient and understanding throughout this ordeal, never pressuring me to choose him over my family. After weeks of arguments and tears, I finally stood up to my parents. I told them that Luke made me happy in a way that money never could. I explained how intelligent and hardworking he was, and how he had dreams of making something of himself. My mother was the first to come around. She saw how happy Luke made me and eventually convinced my father to give him a chance. It wasn't easy, but gradually, my parents started to warm up to Luke. As we neared graduation, Luke proposed to me. It wasn't a grand gesture with an expensive ring, just a simple, heartfelt declaration of love under our favorite tree on campus. I said yes without hesitation. We got married in a small ceremony shortly after graduation. My parents insisted on paying for the wedding, which I think was their way of showing acceptance. Luke was uncomfortable with the extravagance at first, but he understood it was important to my family. After the wedding, Luke got a decent job at a local company. It wasn't a high-paying position, but it was a start. We moved into a modest house, nothing like the mansion I grew up in, but it was ours, and that made it special. The first few months of our marriage were blissful. We were young, in love, and excited about building our life together. Luke worked hard at his job, often putting in extra hours to impress his bosses. I was proud of him and supported him in every way I could. We had our challenges, of course. Learning to live together and manage our finances was a new experience for both of us. I had to learn to budget and live within our means, which was a significant adjustment for me. But we faced these challenges together, and it only made our bond stronger. Looking back, I realize how much I've grown since meeting Luke. He taught me the value of hard work and the importance of being true to oneself. I may have given up a life of luxury, but I gained something far more valuable, true love and happiness. As I write this, I can't help but smile. Luke is in the other room, probably working on one of his projects. We may not have much in terms of material possessions, but we have each other, and that's all that matters. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful for that college project that brought us together. It changed my life in the most beautiful way possible. Update when it's been 6 months since my last post, and I wish I could say things have only gotten better. But the truth is, life has taken an unexpected turn, and I find myself at a crossroads I never thought I'd face. At first, married life with Luke was everything I had hoped for. We were happy in our little house, building our life together. But as the months went by, I started to feel a gnawing dissatisfaction. The reality of living on a tight budget began to wear on me. I missed the freedom of being able to buy whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. Luke noticed my restlessness and tried to understand. We had countless conversations about our finances and our future. He was working hard at his job, putting in extra hours, trying to climb the corporate ladder. But progress was slow, and I found myself growing impatient. The breaking point came when my old college friends invited me to a luxury spa weekend. I couldn't afford to go, and it hit me hard. I realized how much I missed my old lifestyle. That night, Luke and I had our first big fight. I accused him of not trying hard enough to provide for us, and he accused me of being materialistic and ungrateful. We both said things we didn't mean, and the next morning, the tension between us was palpable. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I told Luke I wanted to look for a job. I argued that with 2 incomes, we'd have more financial freedom. Luke was supportive, albeit a bit hesitant. He worried that I was doing this for the wrong reasons, but he didn't stand in my way. I applied to several companies and landed an interview at a prestigious firm. That's where I met Alexander, 32M, the CEO. He was everything Luke wasn't: confident, assertive, and incredibly wealthy. During the interview, Alexander seemed more interested in me than my qualifications. He offered me a job on the spot, with a salary that made my eyes widen. I took the job, telling myself it was for our future. But deep down, I knew there was more to it. I was drawn to Alexander and the world he represented, a world of luxury and power that I had left behind when I married Luke. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into work. I was staying late at the office, attending business dinners, and slowly getting sucked into Alexander's orbit. Luke noticed the change in me. He tried to be supportive, but I could see the hurt in his eyes when I came home late again or when I talked excitedly about my day at the office. One night, after a particularly successful business deal, Alexander invited me to celebrate at an upscale restaurant. The champagne flowed, and as the night wore on, Alexander made his move. He told me how beautiful and intelligent I was, how I deserved so much more than what I had. And then he kissed me. I'd like to say I pushed him away immediately, but I didn't. For a moment, I let myself get lost in the kiss, in the promise of the life Alexander was offering. It was Luke's face flashing in my mind that finally made me pull away. I left the restaurant in a daze, torn between guilt and excitement. The next few days were a blur of confusion and inner turmoil. I avoided both Luke and Alexander, making excuses about being busy with work. But I knew I couldn't avoid the decision forever. It all came to a head when Luke surprised me at the office one day, bringing lunch. He walked in just as Alexander was leaving my office, his hand lingering a little too long on my shoulder. The look on Luke's face told me he had seen everything. That night, we had the conversation I had been dreading. Luke asked me point blank if there was something going on between Alexander and me. I couldn't lie to him. I told him about the kiss, about my conflicted feelings, about how I missed my old life. Luke listened quietly, his face a mask of pain. When I finished, he asked me one simple question: do you want a divorce? The word hung in the air between us, heavy and final. I looked at Luke, the man I had once thought was my soulmate, and I saw a stranger. In that moment, I made my choice. Yes, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I want a divorce. Luke didn't argue or try to change my mind. He simply nodded, got up, and walked out of the room. I heard him in the spare bedroom, packing a bag. When he came back, his eyes were red, but his voice was steady. I hope you find what you're looking for, Mary, he said. And then he was gone. The next day, I moved out of our house and into a luxury apartment Alexander had arranged for me. Within weeks, I was wearing designer clothes again, attending high society events, and living the life I thought I had left behind. But as I write this update, sitting in my plush new home, I can't help but wonder, have I made the biggest mistake of my life? Update 2. It's been a year since my last update, and I'm writing this with a heavy heart and trembling hands. I've made a terrible mistake, and I don't know how to fix it. After leaving Luke, I dove headfirst into my new life with Alexander. We got married in a lavish ceremony just 3 months after my divorce was finalized. It was everything I thought I wanted: designer dress, exotic location, celebrities in attendance. My parents were thrilled that I had come to my senses and married someone from our social circle. At first, everything seemed perfect. Alexander showered me with gifts, expensive jewelry, designer clothes, exotic vacations. We lived in a mansion that made my childhood home look modest. I had everything I thought I had been missing when I was with Luke. But as the months went by, the gilded facade began to crack. Alexander, the charming and attentive man I thought I had married, slowly revealed his true colors. Behind closed doors, he was controlling and manipulative. He criticized everything I did, from the way I dressed to how I spoke at social events. Nothing I did was ever good enough for him. I soon realized that Alexander saw me as nothing more than a trophy wife, a beautiful accessory to enhance his image. He used my family's wealth and social connections to further his business interests, all while making me feel worthless and incompetent. Alexander began to isolate me from my friends and family. He always had a reason why we couldn't attend gatherings or why I couldn't meet up with old friends. He monitored my phone calls and messages, claiming he was just looking out for me. Before I knew it, I was completely dependent on him for everything. The emotional abuse took its toll on me. I lost weight, had trouble sleeping, and was constantly anxious. The confident, ambitious woman I once was had disappeared, replaced by a shell of my former self. I tried to convince myself that I was happy, that this was the life I had chosen. But deep down, I was miserable. I missed Luke's kindness, his genuine love, the way he always supported and encouraged me. I realized too late that what we had was real and precious. One night, after a particularly nasty argument where Alexander belittled me in front of his business associates, I found myself alone in our massive bedroom, crying uncontrollably. I picked up my phone, scrolling through old photos, and came across a picture of Luke and me from our college days. We looked so happy, so in love. It hit me then, with crushing clarity, how badly I had messed up. I wanted to reach out to Luke, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness. But I knew I had no right to disrupt his life again. A mutual friend had told me that Luke had moved to another city for a job opportunity. I hoped he had found happiness, even as I realized I had thrown mine away. As I write this update, I feel trapped in a loveless marriage with no escape. Alexander controls all our finances, and I have no resources of my own. The prenup I signed in my love-blind state ensures that I'll walk away with nothing if I leave him. I don't know what to do. I'm scared of Alexander, of what he might do if I try to leave. But I'm also terrified of spending the rest of my life like this, empty and alone in a gilded cage. I made a terrible mistake choosing wealth and status over genuine love and happiness. I hurt the one person who truly loved me for who I was, not for my family's money or social status. And now, I'm paying the price for my foolishness. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's that true love and genuine happiness are priceless. No amount of money or luxury can fill the void left by a loving, supportive partner. I only wish I had realized this before it was too late. Update 3. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and I can hardly believe how much has changed. I'm writing this from a small, modest apartment across town, my hands still shaking slightly, but for the first time in a long time, I feel hope. The day after I wrote my last update, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at me. That's when I knew, I couldn't live like this anymore. I had to leave Alexander, no matter the cost. I spent the next few days carefully planning my escape. I knew Alexander monitored my phone and computer, so I bought a prepaid phone and used the library's computer to research domestic abuse resources. I secretly packed a small bag with essentials and hid it in my car. The opportunity came when Alexander left for a business trip. As soon as his plane took off, I sprang into action. I grabbed my hidden bag, emptied out my personal bank account, which thankfully still had some money from before our marriage, and walked out of that mansion without looking back. I checked into a small hotel under a fake name, my heart racing the entire time. For the first few days, I was constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid that Alexander would find me. But as the days passed and I remained undiscovered, I began to relax. I reached out to a domestic abuse hotline and they've been incredibly supportive. They helped me find this apartment and connected me with a lawyer who's helping me navigate the divorce process. It's going to be a long and difficult road. Alexander is furious and threatening to drag this out in court, but I'm determined to see it through. These past 2 weeks have been a whirlwind of emotions. I've cried more than I thought possible, but I've also felt moments of pure relief and even joy. For the first time in a long time, I'm making my own decisions, living life on my own terms. I've started seeing a counselor to work through the trauma of the past year. It's hard, facing the mistakes I've made and the person I became, but it's also liberating. I'm learning to forgive myself, to understand that I was a victim of manipulation and abuse. As I heal and grow, I'm starting to see the world in a new light. I've realized that true happiness comes from within, not from material possessions or external validation. I'm rediscovering the things that used to bring me joy: reading, painting, long walks in the park. Simple pleasures that I had forgotten in the whirlwind of my toxic marriage. I've also reached out to some old friends, including a few from my days with Luke. To my surprise and relief, they've been incredibly supportive. Their kindness has been a balm to my battered spirit. Speaking of Luke, I often find myself thinking about him. Not with regret or a desire to rekindle our relationship, that ship has sailed, and I respect that he's moved on with his life. Instead, I think of him with gratitude. Our time together taught me what real love looks like, and that knowledge gave me the strength to leave Alexander. I don't know what the future holds. The road ahead is uncertain and likely to be difficult. But for the first time in a long time, I'm excited about the possibilities. I'm rediscovering who I am without the influence of wealth or a controlling partner. I'm learning to stand on my own 2 feet, to value myself for who I am, not what I have. As I sit in this small apartment, surrounded by secondhand furniture and bare walls, I feel richer than I ever did in that sprawling mansion. I have my freedom, my self-respect, and hope for the future. And right now, that's worth more than all the money in the world. To anyone out there who might be in a similar situation, please know that you're not alone. There is help available, and you deserve to be safe and happy. It's never too late to start over. I'm taking things one day at a time. Some days are harder than others, but I'm proud of how far I've come. I'm working on rebuilding my life, focusing on my personal growth and healing. I've even started looking for a job, something that's mine, that I've earned on my own merits. I want to thank everyone who reached out after my last post with words of support and encouragement. Your kindness gave me the strength to take this leap. I may have lost my material wealth, but I've gained something far more valuable, my freedom and self-respect. As I close this chapter of my life, I'm filled with a mix of emotions, sadness for the pain I've caused and endured, regret for the mistakes I've made, but also hope and excitement for what lies ahead. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm looking forward to finding out.